Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I am delighted to be here this Thursday afternoon with James McKenzie, JP Mason, taking a well-earned break over the Christmas and New Year period. If you're tuning in, JP, I hope you're having a great time and you are preparing for the big one this weekend, as we all are. James, you have been furiously typing away all week on the old blog. That'll keep us going at the end of the year. And I think today it's all about looking at where we are, how we select that side, how confident you feel that we are. But as the tagline says, James, regardless of the form, which has been Jekyll and Hyde, topsy-turvy, very inconsistent, I still think that we've got a wily old fox in Rodgers when it comes to a fixture like this. And I think he showed that at Ibrox earlier this season, James.
Yeah, I think if you look back to that situation at the start of the season, I think we were worse off then than we are now heading into the game. I mean, you look at the completion. It was the first time fans had felt negative about the club in about 2 seasons. It was under Ange Postecoglou. It was probably the first time we'd felt negative about the club since maybe about 6 games into Ange Postecoglou's tenure. So I think we were absolutely battered with injuries. And when you look at the situation at Celtic, we kind of still are battered with injuries. There's a lot of key players that would have been the first name on Brendan Rodgers' team sheet that aren't going to be able to be named on his team sheet this weekend. You're thinking Cameron Carter-Vickers. Brendan Rodgers has only been able to play Rio Hatate in about 7 games this season. I mean, and he was a player that we had is up there as one of the best players last season. A sort of luxury player, a flair player, a creative player, which is coincidentally exactly what Celtic have been missing when you look at some of their defeats this season.
Yeah.
But I think the last 2 games will have gone a long way to rebuild some confidence and momentum to that team, because getting booed off the park, not only at half-time, but at full-time against Hearts as well, I've really shot the confidence. And we know Brendan Rodgers was a bit scathing with his comments about the players that I think Liam Scales mentioned in the media, that it hurt to be criticised by the manager like that and have him questioning your passion, things such as that, which are all key aspects to have at Celtic. But the last 2 games, I think, will go a long way in rebuilding the confidence. Then we got booed off at half-time against Livingston, don't forget, because we'd been knocking on the door the entire time, but the anxiety was still there. And scoring the 46th minute, you immediately quell a lot of those doubts. And it was a really similar game against Dundee. It was, you're knocking on the door, perhaps even more than we were against Livingston in that first half. But we just couldn't get the goal. Then you get the goal early in the second half, and most of the doubts are quelled. There's still a bit of anxiety that you never know Dundee could come back into this, but a late brace, a late double salvo from none other than Mikey Johnston, and that made the score fit the performance a little bit more, because that wasn't a 1-0 game. It was all Celtic from start to finish. And when you look at, like, the defences looked a bit more assured over the last 2 games. I know you're playing against Livingston, who have been on a slide. I think heading into the game against us, they had 2 goals in the last 9 league games.
They're going down. They're going down, aren't they?
I think people have been calling at the start of every season, but I think this is finally going to be the season where Livingston go down. But we've only faced 1 shot on target in the last 2 games. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty decent. I mean, the defence has looked pretty assured. I know the wing backs would come under a bit of criticism. We'd played against 2 sort of average teams, although Dundee have been really overperforming for a promoted team this season. But we're looking better than we were going off the field against Hearts 2 weeks ago, which I think the way you should be looking at things, we're looking a bit better.
What I wanted, I think if I go back to the Kilmarnock game, James, just as I share our link on the socials here, multitasking. Some people say we can't do it. There we go. That's as good as it gets. So when I was looking back at that Kilmarnock game, the disappointment of that game, already I had one eye on the Rangers game, the derby on the 30th. And I started looking at the fixtures, saying that we need to start this resurgence to build the momentum and the confidence and the rhythm. And I thought that Feyenoord was the first step towards it. But it was almost like the Jekyll to the Hyde, wasn't it? We got the performance. And I think all 3 performances, to be fair, in the Champions League at home this season, there's been plenty to be positive about. You know, if you look at those 3 games and the biggest other game domestically being the Rangers game, and look at how we've approached them. Not as much flair at Ibrox, but the 3 home games, in the Champions League, I'm looking at that thinking, look, there's definitely something to be positive about. There's something to work with here. And we followed that up with that really, really poor performance, the worst performance of the season against Hearts. And I mean, that's saying something when you remember the first Kilmarnock defeat in the Cup. That was a really poor day at the office. And I remember since then...
We still had chances in that game. We still had chances. The thing is, against Hearts, there was a lack of fight. I think the goals, they were poor goals to concede anyway, although one of them is a fantastic free kick. You shouldn't be giving away that free kick in the first place. Mm-hmm. One thing you never want to see from a Celtic team, where the expectation is to win and win comfortably every single week, you never want to see it seem like the team is lacking a bit of passion, a bit of fight. When the back is against the wall, when the going gets tough, that's usually when you find out who the real Celtic quality players are. And no one was stepping up. No. I think that is what led to even more frustration in the ground. Just the fact that no one really seemed to want to go for it.
You've used some words there, and Brendan Rodgers used them himself, James. When you start hearing a manager using words like desire, passion...
Start calling me a cheerleader, because I'm repeating all everything Rodgers says.
Oh, the cheerleaders exist elsewhere. Obviously, Brendan Rodgers is going to Newcastle this week. That's another story. They're so predictable. But Rodgers was using that type of language, wasn't he? And he continually uses the word ambition. You've got to show ambition. And he's not talking about the players in their careers. He's talking about in-game ambition to do things like take ownership of the game, like you're talking about. Nobody seemed to want to do that. I think McGregor always looks to be doing it. But beyond that, he singled out McGregor, I think Scales and O'Reilly. They were the three players who didn't get flack from Rodgers after the Hearts game. So it was a situation where we only had 2 games then, because I'm thinking Feyenoord, Hearts, Livingston, Dundee, get ourselves primed, get ourselves ready for this Rangers game. And it was like stop-start, so we had to start again. And we had to start again against the worst team in the league. Now, I'm going to take as much positives as we can from those 2 victories. You've got to, right? But at the same time, you have pointed out there that over the 180, 190 minutes of football, James, these teams, did you just say they didn't have a shot on target between them?
Dundee had a shot on target.
Livingston
didn't. One shot with face. So I hope that doesn't lead to a bit of...
It's a different game. Yeah, it's a different game on Saturday, isn't it?
Would you rather he was facing no shots than he was facing a barrage of shots for the goalkeeper? Would you want him to be as prepared for what Rangers are going to throw at him as possible?
Bit of both. And I think the biggest concern isn't so much Hart. I mean, I've criticised Hart for not being commanding enough. And we're going to go right through the team. Tell us what you think the starting 11 is going to be. Obviously, there's a question mark around Cameron Carter-Vickers. The pre-match press conferences will confirm whether or not he makes it. I don't think Rodgers should confirm either way. I've been saying that for a few weeks now, James. Don't give us an update. I know the fans always want to know who's available and who's not. Don't tell anybody. Don't let Rangers prepare even more than they've been given the opportunity to for this particular game. And I think Joe Hart, I've been critical of him for not commanding his area. We've been very, very weak, particularly at the set pieces. Shanklin's goal was that argument in one nutshell, in one goal. That's what we do wrong.
Yeah, just for that, I saw when it was... I was watching the end of Derby yesterday. Sky pulled up a graphic. It was teams who have conceded the least goals from set pieces in the Central Premiership this season. Hearts were at the top with 0. They'd flashed up the top 6 teams, 6 teams who have conceded the least. And Celtic weren't on that graphic, I don't think. So that should speak volumes to it. It reminds me of during that 10-in-a-row attempted season where you'd see the stat, it was goals conceded in the last 10 minutes or goals conceded from set pieces. It was really clear where their Achilles heel was, and it's still clear now. I don't think the set piece situation really got sorted out even under Ange. I still remember in the 2 seasons under Ange, we were conceding a lot of goals from set pieces, and it's something you should really be looking to try and fix.
See, these 2 disciplines, or is it one discipline, but at each end of the park, where you defend the set piece and you attack the set piece. Celtic are very poor at both. And if you were to get the Celtic side right up to speed with those 2 disciplines, James, then you're looking at a different team, because you're right, we're far too easy to score against. And then when it comes to...
I think teams in Scottish football, they're not going to be able to beat Celtic with real flashes of quality. If they're going to score against a Celtic team, it is going to be where there's a strike of luck involved from something like a set piece. So on the other side of the coin, they will be focusing directly on, we can get them at set pieces. He's the smallest player there. you stick on him, and that's where he can get a team like Celtic, because the chances of them cutting a team like Livingston cutting Celtic open with a fantastic passing move, it's not really going to happen.
It's not going to happen. And see, in the final third, James, that's where they can buy free kicks. Anywhere in the final third for our opposition is giving them an opportunity. They flight a ball in. We're failing to deal with the danger. And we're losing far too many easy, cheap goals as a result of that. The discussion yesterday
as well. I think I think you've pulled it up many times in the show. Guys like Alistair Johnston, Greg Taylor, when it's clear set pieces are Achilles' heel, don't be needlessly pulling someone's shirt about in the final third. There's no need to do that. You're just bringing unnecessary pressure on us. And I remember you pointed out just before Hearts scored that second goal, that's a terrible free kick to give away. And they go and score from it. So it's not just a case of defending the set piece. It's all about don't even let that opportunity appear in the first place, because it's clear that's what the problem is.
Remove it at source. Remove the root of the problem, which is giving them away in the first place. I pitched a query yesterday, James, and with a completely open mind in relation to our corner kicks, and with the caveat being, I understand why globally football has changed when it comes to flighting in a corner, trying to get the big man with his head on it, right? But when you are getting as many corner kicks as Celtic are, and I think the average is between, 14, 15 a game domestically, we need to get some kind of payout at some point. And it's a way of, listen, if we can't flight the ball in and win the header, right? And I was watching a wee compilation earlier, has scored a few headers for us, and I don't think he's doing enough of that, actually, when you consider how many corner kicks we get. On the socials, it was raised that our footballers now more cautious due to the educational element and the awareness of the fact that heading the ball in later life can affect you. You've got to consider that, absolutely. Are we training less? Well, guidelines have started to be introduced in football, James, where you've not to head the ball as often. Back in the day, it was a head and drill where you'd have been. I remember speaking to Andy Lynch for his autobiography, Hoop Stars and Stripes, which is up there on my shelf. And Andy used to he told me that they would have this drill where the balls would be crossed in. So obviously, guys like Charlie Gallagher and all that are getting practice of crossing the balls in, all the wingers, and then players would be heading the ball. And it was a drill, and it went on for ages and ages and ages. And then because it was at Barnfield, they would have to go and get their own ball after it went behind the goals. And Andy said that he remembers, actually it was almost like the old Tweety Pies flying around the head after about 10, 15 minutes, a head on these heavy balls. So I totally get that aspect of it. And if that's the case, and Celtic aren't flighting the balls in because players are not actually drilled, although looking at Liam Scales the other week, he knows exactly how to do it, then we need to find a better way.
Looks like Luis Palma's trying to score from every corner he takes. I can't remember if it was someone on Twitter in the Acsom chat, but he just keeps firing right onto the goalkeeper's head. And well, I'm sure we'll touch on Luis Palma later on. So I'll save my point on Palma for now, because I'm sure we'll get to him a bit later on.
We'll go for every one of them as we try and build our side going into the weekend, James. And obviously, when we're talking about certain positions, I think what comes in at this time of year is a discussion around where we need to strengthen as a team as well. And I think that's an issue, our corner kicks. And then when you're playing Rangers, that average obviously isn't maintained. It's far reduced from the average that we get against the likes of Livingston and Dundee, etc. Sorry if I disappeared for a moment there. I'm back, and I'll keep talking all my way through it. So with regards to the corner kick situation, we've got Palma, we've got O'Reilly, we've got Turnbull taking them when Turnbull's on the park. But as you say, I think Palma's been quite wasteful from the corners, although he has come into his own. And we'll get to him once we start talking about the winger situation. Now, going into this game, let's start with the defence then. We've no option, obviously, between the sticks. Joe Hart gets the gloves every single time. But I'm going to go back to these big moments, I think, against Rangers. And there was big moments against Rangers under Ange Postecoglou, and of course, in the game under Brendan Rodgers this time round, where I think Joe Hart's been a big player for us, James. And I think that, as much flack as he's getting, there's huge periods of games where he's just not called into action. And then you've got to step up. So the focus of the goalkeeper is absolute pivotal. It's pivotal for you to get the win. I think we've got that with Joe Hart. With his experience, he's playing a slightly different game than he did under Ange. Let's not forget. We never talk about that now, do we? The amount of time that he spent on the ball under Ange Postecoglou, the amount of time after the game, James, we would say a heart and mouth moment once again because he tried a shimmy or a dangerous pass across his own goal and all this kind of stuff. That's been cut out his game, but nobody seems to be mentioning that that's an improvement in Joe Hart's game this season.
Yeah, and if you look back to the first derby of the season, there's a moment late in the game there's probably one or two moments late on in that game that so easily that could have been a 1-1 draw if Joe Hart doesn't pull out the big save. The big one is, I think it's Sam Lammers is running through on goal, and Joe Hart's just the experience to rush out, completely force him off his game a bit. And it's games like this where, as much as your worries about Hart making a mistake are heightened just because of the importance of the game, these are the games where you've got to be utilising his experience a bit more. And if you're going to call upon one singular performance from Joe Hart this season, you're going to go back to that Feyenoord game in the Champions League where it was a very competitive game. They were going to be coming at it with a lot of chances, and Joe Hart was at the top of his game. His performance on that day was arguably one of the biggest differences between winning a win and a loss on that night. And if you can call upon a similar performance from Joe Hart this weekend, then it'll really help Celtic to victory, because he's the sort of player, he's got God knows how many caps for the English national team. You're looking to call upon his experience in a game like this. And I think when you're looking at it, it's going to be Stephen Welsh coming into the team for Cameron Carter-Vickers if he's injured, I think. So you're going to need a similar sort of command of the defence, much like you had in the first derby this season, where it was Liam Scales and Gustav Lagerbielke, a fairly sort of unsettled and uncertain centre-back pairing. So you're going to need Joe Hart at the top of his game.
See, when you look at the situation with Joe Hart then, right, and the fact that we've been speaking about priorities in the transfer market, both in January and then obviously going into the summer as well. You've mentioned in the past, James, you don't do that business in January. Is your opinion on that changed at all?
Well, it's not my opinion that we don't want to do it. It's just how I think the Celtic see it. I think there's a good few players that you should be looking at to improve the Celtic first team, because we're in a title race now, and to win title races you have to add quality to the team. And there is definitely positions that you can pick out on that team. I'm sure people in the comment can pick out players on that park all day long that you would be looking to try and improve. It's just I don't think Celtic really see it that way. That for years it's always been you're bringing up a player like, Mikael Lustig's got an injury, or bring in Jeremy Toljan on loan till the end of the season. So and so and so and so. Or it'll be a project player like a Patrick Klimala or a Vacuum Bio who would never really see the light of day at Celtic. But I want that approach to change. I want us to go and bring in some more players. And it seems like Celtic might be veering towards doing some things a bit differently. I can't remember if it was Stephen McGowan or if it was Mark Hendry that reported it, but they're looking to bring in 2 or 3 sort of first-team quality players, which is exactly what we need. I mean, we need a bit of urgency at this point because, as I mentioned, they are in a title race now. You have to be spending the money and you have to be going out to make sure this team is as strong as possible to ensure you have the best chance of winning this league. And you definitely need a few signings in January to do that, and that all stems from just a poor summer transfer window. And we were calling it that back in September. The Celtic support were calling it that back in September, and the call was you've spent however much money. You just accept that you've spent however much money on so many players, and now we're looking at that as you spent £8 million on 2 centre backs who aren't making the squad. You've spent £2 million on a winger who just isn't really playing that much. There's so many players we've signed in that summer transfer window that just are nowhere near the Celtic squad. The only one is Luis Palma. He's the only player who looks like he could be European calibre. The only player who looks like he could be a starter for Celtic. And it's just a bit of a damning verdict of that summer transfer window.
We've had loads of good conversations about this privately and also on the show, James. And yeah, we don't have to say it. Everybody, I think, agrees it was a really poor transfer window. We've been saying it since it happened. You know, that some of the titles of the earlier Acsom bulletins this season were, you know, when's the biggie? When's the one coming? It's like going shopping. You go and do your weekly shop, you buy stuff for the freezer because you know it's going to be thawed out later on. You can use it a couple of weeks down the line. We just bought everything for the freezer. There was nothing that we could actually whip up for immediate consumption. And obviously Palma from the players that have come through, Palma has shown it. And I made the point, James, you said about European calibre. I think we should always be buying players that you think can either fit into the team for the Champions League or can become that player, Hatate, O'Reilly-esque. But when it comes to Palma, I was looking at his minutes in the Champions League, and he's played, I think it's 300 minutes, right? He's played 300 minutes in the Champions League. He scored 2 goals. And I know that he's maybe had 5 appearances, but obviously never started all the game, never finished all the games. And he also had that goal against Lazio chopped off. So I think he has made an impact
Maida's
at
laces.
that level. Yeah, I know the laces of Maida's boot. He has made an impact at that level. And I think that, we've been pretty critical in here because he is inconsistent. I've raised a bit of a concern about his discipline. He picks up far too many bookings. He disappears from games when you need to dig in, you need to get the fight. I'll come to Bernardo later because I think we've seen a bit of that from him the other night, which is great to see. Bernardo, when he scores that scrappy goal and he gets dug in, he does all the dirty work, a lot of the work that goes under the radar. And I think, we'll get into the midfield and why he's been selected in the last 2 games with one eye on the Rangers game. But yeah, Palma, I think from that clutchy signings has definitely been the shining light. But we'll also get into the situation that we now find ourselves in when it comes to wingers. I think it's bizarre.
I just wanted to touch again on Palma. I was thinking about this yesterday, and when I was making up my player ratings article, I don't know, is it that controversial of an opinion to say that Luis Palma has been our second best player this season, behind Matt O'Reilly?
Matt O'Reilly.
I was weighing up.
It's an argument to be had. Yeah,
I'd imagine I'd get called absolutely ridiculous if I said he was better than Matt O'Reilly this season. But I think out of the players this season, I think he might be second best. Every player this season, even Matt O'Reilly, has had inconsistencies. There's been, I think, the last few weeks, Matt O'Reilly's not looked as influential as he was at the start of the season, and it could be a bit of recency bias, given Palmer's probably been the best player the last 2 games. But I think there's a lot of discourse. I know his corners might annoy you. He might seem a bit one-dimensional at points, but the amount of chances he creates in every single game, those chances that are put on a plate that are getting passed up by Celtic's forwards and Celtic's midfielders, he's creating them. Yeah. Because in the last 2 games, there wasn't Dyson Maeda creating the chances. There's a reason he was the guy getting hooked.
Everything down the left.
Mark. They were all coming through Luis Palma. I think it's gone a bit understated how good of a signing he has been at this moment. And I think in a couple more months, I think fans are really going to realise just how good a player he really is, because it's European calibre that we've been crying out for. So I don't get how there can be so many complaints about a guy who's got 2 goals in the competition. Then we're questioning his abilities when there's players who have all taken to so much that haven't been doing the same thing.
Well, James, I think what you do after the Rangers game, here's something that for you to look at. We'll look at all the player ratings that you've done for all the games this season, and you'll see who the second in the list is. And it wouldn't surprise me if it was Palma. Feed the Bear. Always great to see you in the comment section on YouTube. Thank you very much for supporting a Celtic state of mind. We have got huge plans for 2024, massive. We're pushing everything further when it comes to Acsom. Your daily bulletin will always be at 12:30, a wee bit like Coronation Street, 7:30 at night. You know it's there. But there's loads more that we're doing.
State of mind to Coronation Street.
Never. Well, if you were going to compare it to a soap, it need to be Corrie. I'm not having, EastEnders, Emmerdale, High Roads, or even El Dorado. People will be shouting River City. I get it, right? But you know where they are every day at 12:30. But there's loads more to come. Merry Christmas to you as well, and Happy New Year to every single person that tunes into Acsom, either daily, once a week, once a month, now and again, whenever. Thank you all for your support. John Mullane comes in to say, "Let's go, boys." Yes, we are getting that vibe. We're starting to feel the pre-match kind of tension creeping in Jungle Lion. Huge day on Saturday could define the season. And for everybody on the socials that say, does Jungle Lion sponsor Acsom? No, he's just on every day and he comments every day. So the chances are, unlike Celtic Corners, you do it enough times and you're going to get a result. Paul McLean comes in as well. For Celtic to get anything out of this Hatate and Abada must play, drop Mira to the bench. Right, we're going to go through the team, and this is a talking point. I disagree with Paul here, right? Because we opened the show up. Listen, if it's based on ability, 100%. But we opened the show up, James, talking about momentum, rhythm, and using the last 2 games to get that understanding. Now, I know Abada and Hatate have been through this before. They know how to play against Rangers. They've done it very successfully in the past. But I've always got a concern about a player just coming back from injury, and it's a big game, you're so keen, you just throw them in. I've always got a concern about that.
I'm trying to
If they're
think of an
fit,
example.
do they
but
play?
I'm trying to think of an example of that, because there definitely is one in recent Celtic history where I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Remember the European game? Kyogo and McGregor? They came out of nowhere and they were thrown into the starting 11. By the way, it worked out, so I'm probably contradicting myself.
If you look at the other side of the coin, I think it was a race against time for Rodgers and Edouard to be fit for the 2019 League Cup final. And the team comes out, you see, Rodgers and Edouard travelled with the team, everybody's getting excited, he's going to play. And then you get the team and you see it's Lewis Morgan up front with Mikey Johnston on the wing. Then all of a sudden you're a bit, oh. But we won that final at the end, and it ended up, as much as we weren't good on the day, that was one of the most enjoyable League Cup final victories, I'm sure, over the last few years. I've completely got off course for your question. What was your question?
El Yunusi, there's an example. El Yunusi was playing as though he had still had his moon boot on in the cup final.
Yeah,
never have played.
He should never have played that game, and
never have played.
He wasn't the same that season. He'd been in great form that season, but he gets thrown in for there, and you probably couldn't pick a good performance from him for the rest of that season.
Yeah, I've always got my concerns, Paul. Let us know in the comment section if you agree with Paul McLean. If Abada and Hatate are fit, has Rodgers been saving them for the big one? Is he going to throw them in? We've been crying out, I think, for strong wings rather than just one strong wing, James. We've had one strong wing all season. We need to be firing on both cylinders. And Hatate, of course, is the playmaker, and we've been missing him. We really have been missing him. And we've been playing 4 other midfielders in his absence. Do you throw the 2 players straight in? Let us know in the comment section. We're talking through the team at the moment, James, and we've already spoken about Hart. Now, I've been noticing in some of your blog entries that you're not as convinced with Johnston's performances this season. You don't think he's been as good or as consistent as he has been in the past. Is it just a wee phase he's going through? Because I still think Johnston is, for me, he's an out-and-out defender. I don't think he does the overlap quite as well as Tony Ralston does. I think Ralston's very good at the overlap, hitting that byline, getting the ball in, whipping the cross in. I don't think Johnston does that with the same kind of regularity or precision. And I also don't think that he and Maeda have got a particularly good understanding down the right-hand side. Although, in saying all that, he still starts on Saturday for me.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to go based off of Brendan Rodgers' comments from during the week. It was unreal. He said he's probably not looking good for a start, but on the bench, maybe there's a chance that both can make an appearance. But he mentioned specifically with Hatate, there's not a chance for a start. He didn't say the same with Abada. He said with Abada, he's had him staying home to do extra sessions. He's been looking sharp in the shooting and the finishing drills. So I think if there's a chance anybody's going to start, I'm going to make a surprise call. I think it's going to be Abada and Palma on the wings. It's a massive call, especially considering the importance for Diaz and Maeda in these fixtures. But I think Leo Abada is just important in these fixtures. I think he does a decent bit of pressing. Obviously not as much as Maeda. He's an absolute animal when it comes to the pressing. But what Celtic need is, right now, we don't need running. We need goals. We need numbers, because the amount of chances that we've been passing up, the problem hasn't been creating chances. The problem has been finishing them off. And we've seen, as much as Leo Abada might be lacking a bit of sharpness coming into this game, he's proven time and time again for Celtic, especially against Rangers, that he's a really clinical finisher. I'm sure if you go and check who Leo Abada scored the most goals against in his career, which team he's scored the most goals against, I'm sure Rangers will be up there, because he always seems to score in these derby matches. And I was speaking really highly on Abada at the start of the season. I said he was going to be one of the best players under Brendan Rodgers. And I think you've seen this season that we've really missed him. Because a player who has the knack to pop up with a goal when he's not at his best, or even when the team's not at their best, he can still pop up with a goal. That's incredibly important to the team. And there's games like that loss away at Kilmarnock, or the loss at home at Hearts, where you could have used someone like Abada to put away one of these chances. they helped drag the team back into the game. And I think having him on the opposite wing with Palma creating the chances, it'll be a really interesting dynamic. It'll be a massive risk as well, though, which will Brendan Rodgers take? If I was going to pick the team, I would play Leo Abada. But I'm going back on myself. Now, I would play Leo Abada, but I think Brendan Rodgers will probably pick Dyson Maeda based on the fact that he's played the last 2 games. I have just gone back on myself. I know. I've just
You've
backed away.
talked yourself out of it.
I've just backed myself away from the big call. But if I was picking a team, I would pick Leo Abada. But I think Brendan Rodgers will pick Dyson Maeda.
The point was brought up, so we've jumped onto the wingers from the right back. We'll go back in a wee moment once we've finished having a chat about the wingers. I think there's always the big discussion point, whether or not you rate him as a footballer or a defender or not, when it comes to the opposition. James Tavernier as a threat. He's one of Rangers' main threats. He has been over the last few seasons. AGSC Tech, who comes in quite a lot in the comment section. I don't know if you're able to watch live, but you made a comment on the YouTube video after the live broadcast yesterday saying that you had been watching him this season and he was playing more of an inverted role during the game. So he might start off in his traditional right back role, but then he's inverting throughout the match. So that's something to look out for. I think that you always say Maeda because of that threat. You always think, right, Palma's never shown really that he's got that defensive quality that I think in the past we've had from wingers like Maeda. We've also had it from the aforementioned El Yunusi. I thought he was very good defensively, El Yunusi. I think that's why I wanted to see him under Ange Postecoglou. I thought he would have been a great winger for Ange. But we didn't do the deal, and obviously he's doing pretty well now with Copenhagen in the Champions League this season. So I think when you look at the wingers, the reason I'm going for Maeda is for the running, because it's one of the games we're not going to have the same kind of chance creation. It is for the running, and I think then Palma gets switched to the other wing. Whether or not he is as effective on that wing, I don't know. But we've got to nullify the threat as well as create our own chances. And I think also the big reason for it is behind Maeda is, of course, Greg Taylor now. But the last 2 games, and I would expect to see this in the comments, people commenting on this, Taylor's been very good. But in the last 2 games, Taylor hasn't had to defend. This is the big, glaringly obvious sign for me. When Taylor is attacking and he's playing more of that inverted role and he's overlapping Palma and he's getting on the end of Palma's wee knockoffs and all this kind of stuff, I think he looks very effective. Greg Taylor looks like a very effective player. Although I think that he wanders quite a bit. He wanders and he shuts down areas that he shouldn't be in just because he's positional play, etc. The minute we start getting attacked, then we're in danger. And I think that was shown more so against Kilmarnock at Rugby Park than at any other point in the season. The 2 goals he scored, he was nowhere. Now, if Livingston or Dundee, for that matter, were to have broken and had that speed and the incisive pass, the situation would have been the same against us because Taylor spent the vast majority of the game in the final third. So I think what you need to do to combat that is have that defensive quality of a Maeda in front of him. It's all right playing Livy and Dundee, James, but when you're playing Rangers and they are going to be on the front foot for parts of this game, you need to have Maeda's defensive quality on the left-hand side. So that's the reason why I would start with the 2 wingers we've started with in the last 2 games, but I'd switch them. I'd switch their wings.
Yeah, it's understandable. I think Taylor, he does get caught wandering at times, but then again, he does take up some good positions at the same time. There was a good few occasions in the game against Livingston at Celtic Park where he'd be in a perfect position in the box to fire one across goal. But then again, on the flip side of the coin, against in that Kilmarnock game, one of the sort of higher caliber players in the league, and Danny Armstrong for the teams outside, the Celtic and Rangers running at him, it caused him a lot of problems. He really couldn't handle Danny Armstrong on that day, and I think the issues with the wide backs, it doesn't just stop with Greg Taylor. I think Alistair Johnston hasn't exactly been at his best this season either. If anything, he's sort of stagnated because every single game last season, I feel like he was getting better and better and better and better. He was rising to the occasion. Every challenge he threw on, whether it was a trip to Ibrox in his first game in a Celtic shirt, or cup finals, or whatever they like, he was always playing well. And it sort of slowed down. He picked up a knock against Dundee, which I'd use that to excuse him getting caught out quite a few times. But
He got a knock against Hibs as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he got
earlier
the
on.
concussion. He
Yeah.
went off really early in that game. But I think if you're looking for players to step up for this game, I'd be wanting more from the fullbacks just because that's where Rangers' sort of best player is. James Tavernier and Abdallah Sima are Rangers' best players at the moment, and they're going to be targeting those areas. So you need them at the top of the game, or else they're going to cause problems. We know Alistair Johnson, we know the quality that he can bring to a game, and hopefully he can rise to the occasion again because we've seen him do that so often for Celtic, and you want to see him back to his best.
He needs to step up. Now, the final point I'm going to make on the wingers, because I think the situation that we're in at the moment, if we're talking going into January and transfer windows and strengthening the side, I want a left back to come in who does for us what Alistair Johnson does for us, whereby Tony Ralston immediately becomes your second pick. He becomes your backup. And if Tony Ralston needs to play, he brings his own qualities to the game, but he's definitely the backup, James. Anybody who disagrees, let me know. Tony Ralston's my favourite Celtic player. I've said it before. I'm not joking. It's no tongue-in-cheek. I like that type of journey of a Celtic player.
I agree with you. I've said it multiple times on the show. You need a player like Ralston who, whilst you might be a bit worried if you see him named in the team for a Champions League match or whatever, domestically, 9 times out of 10, he'll do the job he's asked upon. He's a solid, dependable option that you can bring in for league games. And you're not going to find, this has got a controversial opinion, I get pulled up at it quite a bit, but you're not going to find a European calibre player who's content being a backup right back for Celtic. They're just not going to be content with that. But you get a player like Anthony Ralston, or even someone like Stephen Welsh, who's quite easy to point the finger at.
Welsh, absolutely.
Out for criticism. I think they can do just fine as a solid and dependable option waiting in the wings.
I agree with that. And I think Greg Taylor's that type of player as well. And I think that's where the problem is. I think we're playing a player who's on that second tier at Celtic. And by the way, you've got a squad big enough to have that luxury, James. I mean, we're going to get to the wingers in a minute, but we're now in a ridiculous situation with centre-halves and wingers where, we might actually be up against it if one person gets injured or 2 wingers go to the Asian Cup, which is what we're facing, 3 even go to the Asian Cup. This is the situation we're now facing. And it throws us into a bit of disarray, even though we've got something like 8 centre-halves and 8 wingers. So on the left-back question, Bernabe is so far out the picture, he's like Kobayashi. He needs to go.
I prefer we didn't revisit my calls from at the start of the season. I
wasn't going to mention it. Wasn't going to mention it, James. Wasn't going to mention it. But Bernabe was a bad bit of recruitment. You move him on. You get what you can take from him. You move him on. It's another jersey we can bring in who contributes to the team. And I'm not looking for a left-back to push Greg Taylor for a game. I'm looking for a left-back to do what Johnston's done. He's came in, he's claimed the jerseys he's on, and the guy that's there already becomes your number 2. Taylor's your number 2. We bring in a top-quality left-back. And I think at the central defensive areas, you mentioned Welsh. I see Welsh as that type of player as well. Where you bring him into, I would say, any domestic situation, and you think he's going to do the job. And I include Saturday in this, by the way, because that is going to be a topic of discussion. Scales, I think there's a discussion to be had whether he's that type of player, because I think we've tried 3 times in the summer to bring in a replacement for Starfelt, yet out of the 3 players that came in, none of them has grabbed the nettle, and it's been down to Scales to do that. And fair play to him, a proper Ralston-esque resurgence and resurrection in that player. But I think if you're going to progress in Europe, and this isn't going down on scale, it's not an issue with Taylor, it's just if you want to progress in Europe, you need to have a better quality than that. You need to have another CCV in the central defensive area. You need to have another standard of player like Alistair Johnson at left back. Then you can start moving forward. That's why we've got so many issues at the back. But with the wingers, I put out a tweet today. I still call it a tweet. Sorry, guys. Retro. I put out a tweet today on the back of the news that both Yang and O are going to the Asian Cup. And the point I made was, will we be in the market for a winger as well as a striker now that these guys have been picked for Jurgen Klinsmann?
Will we finally see Rocco Vata in the team? Will we finally get that?
Listen, that is the only an excuse sketch right there. If we don't, you'll play anybody except him. Remember the Riordan sketch under Gordon Strachan where he would play anybody except Derek Riordan. It's a wee bit like that. So we're now in a situation where, we lost Jota. So what did we have at that time? We had Maeda and Abada, who would have been your first picks on the wings, right? On the backup, we had Jamesy Forrest and we had Mikey Johnston. And then we had the young guy coming through, Rocco Vata. So we already had 5. We bring in 3. We bring in Yang, Palma, and Tilio. So we're up to 8. We're up to 8 wingers. And then Jurgen Klinsmann picks Yang and O for his squad. We don't know if Mader's going yet. We know Tilio's going with Australia. So potentially we'll be 3 wingers down. We'll be 3 wingers down. And the question was, is a winger now something that we're going to be in the market for? Which I think is ridiculous when you've got 8 guys on the books, James. And had we got to this stage of the season and built on Rocco Vata's performances last year, where he got 4 appearances under Ange, we might have thought, you know what, we're okay. He's got some game time in his legs. We can run with that. But he's not. Abada's coming back from injury. I think Palma is looking really good. You've got Jamesy Forrest and Mikey Johnston. We'll come back to Mikey in a wee minute. But that was the question. Are we now looking also for a midfield, a winger? And if we are, it really is bad squad management. We knew the Asian Cup was coming up. I don't think anyone expected Tilio, with his lack of game time, or Yang, having only won 1 cap previously for South Korea, to be going to this tournament. Everybody was talking about, Maeda, Kyogo, Hatate if he was fit, but nobody was talking about these 2 guys, Tilio and Yang. And we're now in a situation where you're going into January, into February, just over a month, where these guys won't be available, James. Do we run with what we've got on the wings?
So with everybody away, how's it looking? You've got Palma and Abada, who you'd be expecting to be the starters, with James Forrest, Mikey Johnston, and Rocco Vata waiting on the wings. Is that the options we have? It's been made out quite a lot. Whereas people will point to the summer transfer window for it, that how are you getting to the point where you're turning to Mikey Johnston? How is James Forrest starting a game in 2023? But you can't prepare for the sheer amount of injuries and absences that Celtic have had. True. It's just the same way where Liam Scales initially had to step in for the game. We'd signed 3 centre-backs already. There's no way you can prepare for the amount of injuries Celtic have had. And I don't think there should be a real urgency to go out and sign a winger. I think there is other positions that need addressing more than we need a winger. And we should have enough options there to hand it already. I know people might not want to see the likes of Mikey Johnston or James Forrest stepping in for games, but we don't have any European football after Christmas. It's just going to be a case of seeing things through domestically. And I don't have any worries unless we get some crazy draw in the Scottish Cup. We should still be able to navigate our way through those fixtures with Palma, Abada, Forrest, Johnston, and Vata. I don't even think you'd include him in the equation because I don't really see him getting a chance.
He's out the picture.
As much as some of those players might be a bit unfavoured by supporters, truth be told, that should be strong enough to see your way through those domestic fixtures, unless you're worried about lining up against Bucky Thistle with some of them playing or whatever. And just on the other side of the things with the Asian Cup, Graham Arnold, the Australia national team manager, brought up a good point that he said, I think they extended the... Sorry, I've got the cold. I've got a really bad cold. For the Asian Cup, the squads were initially 23-man squads, and it was because they got expanded to 26 players that Marco Tilio got included in that team. So he wouldn't have been included if it was the initial squads anyway. But imagine he can get some playing time, he can get some minutes, and he can make an impact in that tournament. Then does that unlock a new lease of life for some of these players at Celtic? If you look at that side of things, if he can play and if he gets some minutes, God, who knows, it could give him something new to do at Celtic.
Yeah, well, we've seen how international football can benefit players who are not regulars at the club. And one guy that definitely was the case with was the bold Mikey Johnston. Mikey obviously came on against Dundee, done really well, got his brace, a couple of goals, full of confidence. But he is definitely a backup. He's a backup option. And we floated the discussion around the fact that you drop him. You don't drop him. He doesn't get into the starting 11 against Rangers. What's that going to do for his confidence? Well, why would he really expect to? Because it's on the entirety of his performances over the piece under Brendan Rodgers. And I think that when you're looking at what James said about Rocco Vata as well, we've been very vocal about the fact that he should have been getting more game time. However, I would always follow that up by saying we're not looking at the training and the way that people are applying themselves and the attitude, etc. We don't know any of that when it comes into the equation. So when it comes to the wingers, I would tend to agree with you, James. And I think we've got another option. And the other option actually is Kyogo. But again, we don't know if he's going to be picked yet because his form's not been great. And he has been dropped previously by the Japanese national manager. So we'll need to wait and see on that one as to whether or not he's going to be available. The centre-halves, let's get to that. Let's get to the nitty-gritty of Cameron Carter-Vickers. He's a player that we've relied upon for going into 3 seasons now, James. And it's horrible to see when a guy like that goes down. And I don't want to see it with McGregor, Kyogo, Carter-Vickers, O'Reilly, Hart, your spine of your team. And when they go down like that on the eve of the Rangers game, and you're thinking, here we go again. If you cash your mind back to the 1-0 game at Ibrox, where we've gone into that, we've had to do the old panic buy. People call it an emergency buy, panic buy, bringing in Nat Phillips, who wasn't available for the game anyway. Lagerbielke and Scales lined up. We're potentially looking at Scales and Welsh on Saturday. Right. So the big question is, well, I'm not going to say, are you happy with that? Because what you would be happy with is Carter-Vickers. But going into that game, have you enough confidence that those two guys can do the job against Rangers? I mean, we've seen them playing against Feyenoord. I thought they'd done really well at home against Feyenoord. And of course, the other day there, 55 minutes it was when Carter-Vickers went off. Welsh comes in and he partners Scales in the defence. I like Scales, always have done, but I think I regard him like Ralston and Taylor in that kind of second tier of player. James, are you confident he can come in and do a job against Rangers?
Sorry if you can hear my cat scratching to get into the room. You might be able to hear her scratching at the door there. But
we all want to know what the cat's name is.
It's Lily. Lily's the cat. There's there's no Celtic names. That was the name she had when we got her. There's no Henrik the cat or something of this sort. I'm sure there's probably plenty in the comments have some Celtic related pets that they could
absolutely
they could let us know about. But for the centre backs, I think there's only really one duo you can name. I think you'd be watching the game through the gaps in the fingers in your hands if Nat Phillips was to be named in that Celtic team. They can't be can't have Nat Phillips playing, especially after that performance away to Kilmarnock. He wasn't really at his best. But I think Stephen Welsh, you saw after that Feyenoord game, he does go off injured eventually, but I thought he was really good on the day. Stephen Welsh is someone that I've always thought is Stephen Welsh is always a player that I thought has come under a bit unfair criticism when he's been at Celtic. I think he's a good passer of the ball. He's, for his height, he's actually pretty good at winning headers, and he's usually pretty composed defensively. It's just when most people think of Stephen Welsh, they'll go back to that 10-0 season where Celtic we were far from our best, obviously. And Stephen Welsh was playing in the latter stages of that season where results in derby matches weren't exactly convincing. I think there was one where we lost 4-1 where Stephen Welsh wasn't really at his best at all. But he's come on a lot from then, and I think you'll be looking for him to rise up and have a really top performance in the derby this weekend, similar to how he rose to the occasion for that Feyenoord game. I think one thing that's been common with Celtic the last few years is in the European games, there's always been a dead rubber match where all of a sudden we'd pop up with some crazy win with the likes of a Mikey Johnston playing in the wing. I think about that game against Rennes where we beat them 3-0. Yeah, when you think about these games where players just pop up out of nowhere, you get all the fringe players coming together to pull out a phenomenal performance. And Welsh has done that a few times, and you'll be looking for another top performance from him again this weekend.
Yeah, I think so. There was a pass he played actually across the field against Dundee, and it was tremendous. If a playmaker had made the ball work the way he did, and it was a ball that he played out to Palma, we'd have all been raving about it. But Stephen Welsh's distribution, short and long passing, has been excellent. I feel. I'd like to see his stats. I think he's a player again who's been through his own journey of really being left out in the cold in season 2 under Ange Postecoglou, and then it got into the summer period, and I felt he was going to be a guy that was on his way out, James. And then he was handed that contract by Brendan Rodgers. I think Brendan likes to do that with young players. He likes to take them under his wing, build them up, and I think he's doing that a wee bit with Stephen Welsh. He's ahead of Kobayashi, Nat Phillips, Lagerbielke, and Nawrocki. He's ahead of all 4 of those guys. And, the biggest concern about all 4 of them isn't Kobayashi, right? He's came in, it's not worked out. Let's get him moved on like we did with Ideguchi. Nat Phillips, he's came in as an emergency. And because Scales is playing so well, he's not had as much game time. Okay, that's just timing. You move him back to Liverpool. That's fine. No concerns really about those 2 guys. Lagerbielke is a concern, but at least Rodgers has seen him and utilised him and decided, I don't fancy him. But Nawrocki's the biggest concern out of a lot of them because he's just nowhere. He's absolutely nowhere. And when Rodgers gets asked about him in the press conferences, James, because it's a bizarre situation to be paying that kind of money. He was, if you want to put marquee signing, he was the big buy of the summer. And he's just not played. A couple of games. I said there was elements of his game that I liked that reminded me of Jozo Simunovic. I liked Simunovic as a centre-half. I liked Benkovic as a centre-half. If they could have stayed fit, they would have been a great partnership. Celtic were all kind of set to make Benkovic's loan deal permanent, and it was going to cost us £9 million, James. Then he got injured. People forget how far down the line that was as well. But yeah, I think that Nawrocki's the biggest enigma for me. It's bizarre. And you ask yourself, what are you going to do with this guy? Because we've seen it in the past where we've brought somebody in on a hefty transfer fee, and it's difficult to move them on because their wages have taken a hike. You're never going to get your money back. I mean, the biggest surprise was Klamala when we somehow managed to get 3.5 back for him. What do you do with these guys then? I think we're resigned to the fact that Kobayashi and Phillips are away. That's fine. Welsh, Scales, Carter Vickers are all first teamers. What about the rest of them, though? What do we do with them?
The Mike Nawrocki's situation at Celtic has been one that's absolutely baffled me because he was the record signing. He was, you've sold Carl Starfelt and he looks like the player's going to replace him. And he starts the first 2 games of the season, so it looks like he's favoured by the manager. So he must really, really not be showing it in training at all because he's not even had a look in Lagerbielke as much as he's been the one who's been spoken about the most because he's actually played a bit more and he's made some more appearances. Even Lagerbielke's getting on the bench ahead of Nawrocki. So what does that say about his standing for these sort of games? I mean, you think we'll see him at some point, that Bucky Thistle game in January. Surely that is where we eventually see your Kwons, your Nawrocki's, it's 2 days before the Asian Cup, so you might even see Marco Tilly on that game. But I think Nawrocki might stay around. I think the fact you've paid that much money for him, you have to give him a chance to prove himself because when he's been on the park, he hasn't really put much of a foot wrong. I think Lagerbielke, it seems that the solution for Celtic is to sell him. It seems we're going to look to move him on a permanent deal, which, again, it's been baffling because I don't think he's put much of a foot wrong in a Celtic jersey. You just think about, you've got that Feyenoord game away. It's his Champions League debut. He makes a couple of errors and things have really been downhill since then. I mean, he gets that late goal in the reverse fixture and he's dropped from the squad completely. I mean, we've spoke about how good Brendan Rodgers' man management is, but that was an example of bad man management. I mean, a player pops up with a goal like that, you could at least reward him with letting him appear on the bench or something. I mean, that was a really surprising situation there. But I think for the game this weekend, there's only really 2 centre-backs you can play for a solid performance. It's got to be Scales and Welsh. Scales' resurgence this season is really completely thrown up all of Brendan Rodgers' plans because I think Nawrocki was expected to be that Starfelt replacement. You've paid the big money from. He's playing the games at the start of the season. So I thought he was going to be the man to play that position. But Scales' resurgence has completely thrown everything up. And I think Scales can have a part to play long term. I don't think it was a purple patch. And I think the big question will be, we'll see the second half of this season, but I think Liam Scales could even be starting for Celtic next season. He could be the starting centre-back this season. That could be the situation sorted.
When you talk about Lagerbielke, his stock's high in Sweden. He won the award, Best Defender, in the campaign last season. He's broken into the Sweden national squad. He scored a goal. So you strike why that fire is hot. I'm going to ask you the question. You've given me your central defensive partnership. Who's on the bench then? Which central defender's on the bench?
On the bench, I think it'll probably be Lagerbielke. I mean, I sent over an article yesterday on the 3 centre-backs who could play the game. I didn't even mention Nawrocki because he's completely out of the equation at the moment. Someone like Lagerbielke, as much as he's out of the picture as well, he looks far more likely to step in and make an appearance. But I think that it would have to be Welsh and Scales starting and probably Lagerbielke on the bench. I mean, this would be Nat Phillips's last game for Celtic if he does make an appearance. It would be some way to go out if he threw him in for a start, but I think it will probably be Lagerbielke on the bench.
Oh, see, when that graphic drops on the Celtic Twitter page, if Phillips starts, James, it'll be hearts and mouth moments for me, by the way.
Don't
Double
blame me.
denim, well, I will. You've jinxed it. Hail, folks. Build up to the weekend is on. We're accused of paranoia over fixtures. Shankland is better than Kyogo, apparently, and is Jers bound. And Mikey J is the new Jota. Silly season indeed. Yeah, Chris Boyd just opens his mouth and lets his belly rumble at times. I mean, to suggest that Celtic aren't obviously going to be in the market for a striker. I've been saying it on here since Joey Dawson came on against St Johnstone 2 years ago, Boxing Day 2 years ago, where we were right up against it, and Giakoumakis was injured, and Kyogo got injured in game, and we had to bring on a young Joey Dawson. He done all right that day, actually. Never seen him since. But from that point on, we needed...
He should have scored, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he should have. From that day on, we should have had a third striker. We never have. We've always had this thing in our mind where, Maeda could play there or Abada can play there. And we're now in a situation where we've got two strikers and both of them potentially will be at the Asian Cup for 4 or 5 weeks or 4 or 5 games, including the Bucky Thistle game, by the way, which I think is the first one that these guys are going to miss. Yeah, we've been linked to various players. I don't know, James. I've always gone into the Fitzgarden kind of area. I think that as a player, we were definitely interested in. The discussions were way down the line. It came down to a transfer fee with a club. Do we increase that, or are they willing to accept it at this stage of the season? Who knows what they're going to do? But some of the names that are thrown about, and somebody in the comment section, I'm bringing it up not to criticise your unit packs. I just don't agree with this type of player for Celtic. I look at Celtic and think, right, as I say, we've got a two-tier system. You've got players like Tony Ralston, Stephen Welsh, Greg Taylor, David Turnbull, who won't be happy with being in the second tier, which is probably why he'll leave, Mikey Johnston, that type of player, James Forrest, who can call upon domestically to step in, but they're not your first choice. Van Veen, for me, is not a Celtic player. James, he had one decent season in Scottish football. He's post 30. No, he won't do for me. He's not that classy player that we need. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I wouldn't be looking to sign someone like Van Veen, but I've been pretty consistent with you on the podcast that I disagree with you. I don't think Celtic need a third choice striker. I think that is overkill. You're spending too much money for a player who's not really going to get into the team. As much as we've criticised Kyogo's form, he's still been starting every week. Hasn't even really got a sniff. Even though Kyogo has been having a bad season, that's what I call it. So overall, if there's no opportunity for a second striker to play there, where's the opportunity going to come from for a third choice striker? I don't really see the need for it. I think, once again, you've got to be focusing on other positions on the park. I think 2 players for a position where one's going to play should be enough. And we're just in the unfortunate situation where both our strikers are pretty good and from Asia and are going to get beaten getting called up for a tournament like this. So with the links with strikers we have been linked with, the player that I would probably take is Bojan Milovski. He's scored the goals in the league, so there's not going to be as much of a sort of adjustment period, which is where we've seen project players, strikers such as a Bio and a Klamala fail. They've not been able to adapt to the Scottish game. So instead of taking a £3 million risk on someone like that, pay the £4 million on a player who can score in this league. Because you're not signing Bojan Milovski to play in a Champions League game. That's why you've got someone like Kyogo. And you've got the other attackers to do things like that. We are signing a player to really fill a domestic gap for 2 months and then stay around as a consistent goal scorer. And I think Bojan Milovski could do just that. I think even someone like Lon Shanklin, for what we're looking at as a third choice striker or even a second choice, someone like Shanklin could come in and do a job like that. So I'd be looking to sign a player from inside Scotland, because you're not looking to sign a player to go and score in those European games. The one that I would go for is Palma. I've seen Fabio Silva. I've just seen his name pop up in the comments. I wouldn't be going for someone like him. First of all, Michael Ross popping up there. Wolves would want £11 million for Fabio Silva. I think we'd be going for him on loan anyway. And I had a little look at it. Kyogo's apparently had a bad season this season. And Fabio Silva's best ever season, he has 2 goals less than Kyogo has this season at the halfway point. So I wouldn't be looking for someone like Fabio Silva. But if I was going to sign any striker, I would probably go Nawrocki. But I wouldn't be looking to sign a striker anyway.
No, fair play. You're sticking to your guns as well on that one, James. One final point. It's about the midfield. Matt McVicker, afternoon from Milton Keynes, used to watch Matt O'Reilly down here and knew he was a baller from the off. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant season. I agree with you, James. I think the last couple of games haven't been Matt O'Reilly's vintage, but he's a type of player looking to step up. No, he's not been bad. That's the thing. He's set a really high bar, isn't he? And you're looking at him to really step up against Rangers. We know he's got it in his cannon. The interesting thing was the inclusion of Paulo Bernardo alongside Matt O'Reilly and Callum McGregor. This is the final area of the park, I think, that's up for discussion. And I know that earlier on we had the suggestion that Hatate gets thrown right into the mix. I can't see it happening. I really can't see that happening. Bernardo plays a certain game, James, and this is why he was chosen for the Champions League games. Before the game against Dundee, I asked, "What's his role? Why is he here?" You know, we've got cover in this position. But he does a certain job for Celtic, and I think against a Rangers side who will be attacking for periods of this game, he's very important. Again, though, one thing I need to point out about Bernardo, he gives away a lot of fouls. He does. He gives away a lot of fouls, and he needs to be very careful because it's going to be a bit of a tightrope if he gets an early booking. So as well as him to defend whatever set piece is awarded after the foul, Bernardo needs to watch what he's doing. He's going to start against Rangers on Saturday, isn't he?
Yeah, one thing that Bernardo playing the team, he's been playing as number 6. So that's been allowing someone like Cal McGregor to go even further forward. His play's been a lot more advanced. And I think Cal McGregor's been one of our standout players. In these last 2 games where I've got back in the win column, I think if you're Palma's been the best player for me. But if you have to have a second best player, it would be Cal McGregor. His passing's been crisp. He's been making some good runs forward. And Callum McGregor's getting back to his best at the perfect time because he needs someone like Callum McGregor to be at the top of his game when you're playing in a derby match. You want your captain up for it. You want him up for the task. You want him playing well. And I think bringing in Bernardo, even when you were bringing in Iwata initially, you're seeing McGregor getting a bit better in his game. I think playing a midfield of Bernardo, McGregor and O'Reilly, that's probably the strongest midfield we can name. I think the game would pass David Turnbull by. This is why Bernardo gets picked in European games. Brendan Rodgers has said it himself. Those sort of games where it's a bit faster, they don't suit David Turnbull. But someone like Bernardo's got a bit more energy, a bit more of an all-rounder. These games suit him a bit more. So I think it will probably be Paulo Bernardo in the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that, James. You are going to be flying off to Pastures New while Celtic are playing Rangers on Saturday. I need a prediction from you, though. You're not going to be able to fly away without giving me a prediction for the big Glasgow derby.
I'll go 2-1 Celtic. 2-1 Celtic.
2-1 Celtic. I like it. AGSC, you got to shout out earlier on. Bernardo wins a lot of second balls and really uses his height. He is a big lump and a big athletic lad, and exactly what we need in the SPFL. And in this fixture, Turnbull is too passive, and I think a decision's probably already been made on Turnbull, but we'll wait and see. Thank you, every single one of you, for getting involved. We have the big game, and then we've got Hogmanay in the new year to look forward to. We are going to be continuing throughout that whole period. As always, we'll take the Sunday off with the bulletin, and we'll be back on New Year's Day because I'm hoping at that stage I won't have a fuzzy head and I'll be able to come on here. Don't know if I get anybody to join me. We shall wait and see. But have a great weekend and Hogmanay as well. I will be back tomorrow at 12:30 as always. All that's left for me to say, safe travels, and thank you for joining me, James Mackenzie, on A Celtic State of Mind.
Have a good New Year, everyone.